Toronto is being considered as a possible location for a new casino, but a new report from Toronto's Public Health Board says that greater access to gaming would be detrimental to the city. Joining us now for more on these concerns, Dr. David McKeown. He is the Chief Medical Officer for the City of Toronto, and we welcome you back to TVO.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again. I want to read something off the top here, and this will sound familiar to you, and then we'll discuss. Here we go. A casino in Toronto is anticipated to result in an increase in problem gambling rates and the associated health impacts on gamblers, their families, and the community in Toronto and the GTA, with greater impacts on closer communities. That's from that report, the health impacts of gambling expansion in Toronto. First question is this. When we think of your job, my hunch is that people think of flu shots, restaurant inspections, and all of those things that seem consistent with our understanding of public health. We don't think of gambling. So how is gambling related to what you do?
Well, first of all, problem gambling is when gamblers lose control of their gambling. They gamble more than they should, more than they can afford, and they keep gambling even after there are quite serious adverse consequences for the gamblers and their families. This leads to a lot of health problems. Problem gamblers have more depression, more anxiety, more likely to commit suicide, and it can lead to family breakdown, family poverty, and of course that has serious health effects for the family as well.
What led you to the conclusion in your report that the presence of a casino in Toronto would lead to a prevalence of problem gambling in this city?
Well, in this report, we worked closely with the Problem Gambling Research Group at the Centers for Addiction and Mental Health and looked at all of the science, all the research that's been done on gambling and problem gambling, both in Canada and in other countries. And there's a very clear relationship between how convenient it is to gamble and the proportion of the population who are going to be problem gamblers. So more access means more problem gambling.
Here's another quote from the report. It is noteworthy that access to gambling is already increasing in many ways. The Canadian Senate is currently considering Bill C-290, which would legalize single-event sports betting. Automated gambling machines are being installed in many bingo halls in the province. The availability of online gambling is also increasing at a rapid rate, including the launch of the OLG iGambling site. That's set for the year 2013. If gambling is everywhere, as you seem to indicate that it is, what difference would the presence of a casino really make?
Well, people often say that. If you can gamble on your home computer, what difference does it make if there's a casino down the road? Well, it turns out it does make a difference. Internet gambling, although it's widely available, turns out to be one of the least common forms of gambling, at least the kind that lead to problem gambling. Most problem gamblers that seek clinical treatment, for example, have trouble with slot machines and table games, exactly the kind of things that you find in a casino. And the closer to a casino, the more convenient it is, the more likely people are to gamble in a way that causes health problems.
David Letterman's got his top 10 list. Shall we share your top 10 list with the viewers?
Sure.
You know what's on this, but if a casino does come to Toronto, you have recommended the following. Number one, limiting the hours of the casino operation, making sure it's closed for at least 6 hours per day. Number two, restricting the number of electronic gaming machines, i.e. slots, and slowing down machine speed of play and features that promotes false beliefs of the odds of winning. Number three, eliminating the casino loyalty programs. Number four, prohibiting ATMs on the gambling floor. Number five, prohibiting casino credit and holding accounts. 6, reducing maximum bet size. 7, mandating a daily loss maximum. 8, implementing strong casino self-exclusion programs, like a mandatory player card system. 9, issuing monthly individual patron statements. These would allow patrons to see how their personal record of loss, frequency, and duration of play compares to the average customer. And finally, number 10, designating areas for alcohol purchase and not providing alcohol service on casino floors to reduce impaired judgment. Most of these, I suspect, are pretty self-explanatory, but there was one that caught my eye here. Mandatory player card system. What does that mean?
Well, it means that if you go to a casino, if you want to gamble, you actually have to have a card with your identity on it. The advantages of mandatory card systems is it helps the casino run its self-exclusion program, so you can be identified as a person who has decided not to be allowed into a casino if you make that decision. It also allows the casino and researchers to gather a lot of information about who's gambling and how much gambling they're doing and who's getting into trouble.
That's a top 10 list, but which one or two do you think are the most important?
Well, I think the top 10 list, first of all, comes from experts in the problem gambling prevention field. So we took all of the best available evidence for what would help to mitigate the bad effects of gambling and put it all in a list. The number one item on that list really is not to expand access to gambling. And people often go straight to the top 10, skipping that one. Better not to have a casino than to have a casino even with all of these safeguards in place. The one I think that is probably the most important actually is the loyalty programs. They're intended to encourage people to gamble more and gamble more often. Casino operators like them. They've already said they're not likely to relinquish those programs, but the problem gambling experts tells us that they're one of the most important factors in encouraging problem gamblers to continue to have a problem.
Ontario Lottery and Gaming does have a loyalty program, and is it not asking them a lot to get rid of something they've already got?
Well, I think asking them to implement all these measures is asking them a lot, since most of them are not in place in Ontario casinos right now. Some are in place in casinos in other jurisdictions, but it would be a big change in the way gambling is operated in this province if all of those were to be adopted. One of the reasons I think casino operators are reluctant to implement these measures is because they will effectively deter problem gamblers from spending money, and problem gamblers contribute a disproportionate amount of the profits that come from casinos.
But if they did, first of all, we should take a step back. For those people outside the city who aren't following this, there's no guarantee of casinos coming to Toronto. In fact, I suspect the majority of Toronto City councillors at the moment seem more skeptical than more welcoming of the thing. But, you know, we don't know yet, right? They haven't taken a final vote on this.
That's correct.
If they were to adopt all 10 of these measures, meaning, yes, a casino can come here, but you got to follow McKeown's top 10 list, would it then be okay with you?
It wouldn't be as good as not having a casino, but at least would offer some degree of protection against the adverse health effects that we're talking about. It's not clear whether City Council actually has the power to make all of these things happen, but I think they should be part of the debate in any decision about bringing a casino to this city.
Your choice number one is don't come here at all.
To look at it purely from a public health point of view, that's the best choice. It's not only a health issue, though, and City Council is going to be considering this along with all of the other potential pros and cons of a casino. I wanted to make sure they had the right information, the best evidence on health when they make that decision.
But again, your mandate is Toronto, right? The 416.
Correct.
So if it goes to Mississauga or Richmond Hill, that's not in Toronto, but presumably it's 40 minutes away. It's not going to make that much difference, is it?
Well, certainly the closer you are to a casino, the bigger the impact on problem gambling. That's what the research tells us. So a casino anywhere in the GTA, as I said in my report, will have some impact on people who live in Toronto.
Okay. Here's from the Canadian Gaming Association. We've got another quote here that I want to read for you. Consider the data from the United States. Despite the widespread proliferation of casinos, lotteries, and other forms of gambling across the U.S. during the last several decades, study after study shows that pathological gambling remains confined to about 1% of the adult population. And that figure doesn't vary significantly according to the availability of particular forms of gambling. Question, have you drawn the wrong conclusions from your data?
Well, the data that we looked at, both from the United States and from Canada, shows that rates of problem gambling are higher in populations where there's more availability of gambling. So they're higher in Western Canada, where there are more casinos than in Eastern Canada, for example, and they're higher the closer you get to a casino. A number of studies, both in Canada and the United States and in other countries like New Zealand, have shown that consistently.
Is there any concern that you have, again, going by the data of the Canadian Gaming Association, that if you implement or were to implement the measures that you've suggested, you might actually perversely incent people to gamble more quickly so that they can get done what they need to get done in the reduced hours of operations and so on and so forth?
Well, the mitigation measures that I've suggested include not only restricting access by not having casinos open 24 hours a day, but also putting in place measures to limit the damage that problem gamblers can do to themselves and their finances, such as reducing maximum bets, having a maximum spending limit per day. Those can only be implemented with a mandatory player card system, which is why it's on the list.
But they say it's 1% of the population, and there's no point in restricting something that 99% of the people do, in their view, okay, because 1% of the population have a problem with it. What do you say to that?
Well, it's a little bit like alcohol. Most people who go into a bar for a drink will leave the bar and drive home without killing anybody drunk driving. However, it's worthwhile putting some measures in place to limit the harm that happens. So we teach servers of alcohol not to serve people who are already drunk, for example. So we can put in place measures which don't impair people from actually going out and gambling safely, but will limit the damage for those people who are prone to problem gambling.
We've still got a bar on every corner of this city.
That's true.
If we have a casino in this city? It's going to be the end of the world?
It won't be the end of the world, but it'll increase access to gambling, and more people will suffer harm. There'll be more broken families, more people who kill themselves, more people with depression.
The Chief Executive Officer of Caesars Entertainment, Gary Loveman, has the following to say about this. In laissez-faire economies, we tend not to restrict access to something that is consumed safely by the vast majority and restrict it because of its unsafe consumption by the very few. Is he right about that?
Actually, we restrict access all the time. In this province, for example, access to alcohol is restricted. It's sold under a government monopoly, and the reason for that is so that we can put in place conditions to avoid sales to minors, for example, to avoid sales to people who are already inebriated. Those are reasonable controls to try and limit the health harms done by something which is enjoyed safely by the majority of the population.
I should actually ask you about that because, you know, the opposition leader, Tim Hudak, made an announcement this morning in which he said he's in favor of privatizing the LCBO and breaking up the monopoly, allowing beer and wine sales and spirits, he said, in corner stores. That was promised in 1985, that was promised in 1995, not done, but he's bringing out the promise again. Again, purely from a health point of view, would you be opposed to that?
This comes up every few years, and every time it comes up, everyone who's concerned about health, all of the health advocates and health organizations take a position against it for the reasons that we've outlined.
So you'd be opposed to the privatization of the LCBO?
Yes, it removes one important tool for us to limit the harms caused by alcohol consumption.
Are you concerned that you are kind of being portrayed by your critics as Mr. I don't like anybody to have any fun in the big city anymore kind of guy?
I think as long as I'm talking from the evidence, as long as I'm saying what I believe is in the best interest of the health of the population, I'm not worried about what people say about me. What I'm interested in is that the decision makers have the right information to make good health decisions.
I understand, and obviously having a healthy population is your job, and making sure that people don't put themselves into unhealthy circumstances is something that you would want to recommend. Let me play devil's advocate for the other side of the story, which is we now tell people there are a lot of things you can't do anymore in this city. You want to have a cigarette, you can't go here. You want to have a pet, you can't have this kind of pet. You want to talk on your phone, you can't do it in your car. We don't want you to have any more casinos in this place. You want to keep the monopoly in place for liquor sales and beer and wine sales in the province of Ontario. Again, Hudak's line today was, it's 2012 and we can start treating people like adults and let them make their own decisions. What's the response to that?
Well, there has to be a reasonable balance between restrictions on people's individual liberties and what's in the interest of the population as a whole when it comes to health. I think most of the measures you've described are reasonable measures which balance those things. Every time, decision makers need to take these things into account. My job is to make sure that decision makers are aware of what the options are to improve the health of the population and protect that health as they think about the other factors.
If the city, in its wisdom, were to decide to put a casino out by Woodbine, which, you know, there's already a horse racing track there, there is a history of gambling there, would that be the best of the worst options in your view?
Well, probably there would be less access for the City of Toronto as a whole, so from a public health point of view, it might be better than some other options. It really depends on the details. The devil is in the details as far as how easy it is and how the operation proceeds.
Sure, but on the face of it, you could put it right beside the Sky Dome, the casino, in which case it's right on a subway line, right in the middle of downtown and with access for a lot more people. If you put it out by Woodbine, first and foremost, it's really hard to get there by subway, and it's a little further away. So does that allay some of your concerns?
On some fronts, it may. On the other hand, if most people are driving to a casino, one of the things that we see with problem gamblers is they tend to leave the casino late, tired, and drunk, and we have a problem with motor vehicle accidents. So there probably would be pros and cons to any particular location.
Problem gamblers, I gather, are prepared to drive a long way to do their thing. So if it's in Toronto or it's in Richmond Hill or Mississauga or Rama for that matter, does it matter?
Proximity does matter. That's what the research tells us. The closest casino, full casino to Toronto right now is 80 kilometers away. Yes, people from Toronto drive to that casino.
Which one is that? Is that Niagara Falls?
Port Perry.
Oh, Port Perry? There's a casino in Port Perry? Mm-hmm. I didn't even know that. Okay.
More people will go if it's closer, if it's easier.
Okay, you know this question's coming, so here we go. Do you gamble?
I've been in casinos in the past. I'm not a regular gambler.
Not a regular, but you've done it.
I have done it.
Have you enjoyed it?
Of course.
So something that you yourself have done and have enjoyed, you for public health purposes, want to deny to 99% of the population who, like you, does it irregularly and for fun. Is that right?
No, it's not denial. People can still gamble. We want to set the conditions in place to minimize the harm done for people who are prone to problem gambling.
Okay, you don't want to deny people the right to do it, but you'd like to make it more inconvenient for them to do it. And today's all about convenience in today's society. I don't have to tell you.
Yes, it is. I think it's a reasonable trade-off, inconvenience for people who are going to gamble in a healthy and safe way versus limiting the damage, the very severe damage that can be done for problem gamblers.
Last question, last 30 seconds. What kind of feedback are you getting from City Council on this?
Not a lot so far. There's been a lot of interest in the report. All of the city councilors have it. I hope they take it seriously. I've been invited to present some of the findings at some of the community meetings which are going to take place to gauge public opinion on this matter. And we'll see this spring what the decision is going to be.
Dr. David McKeown, Toronto's Medical Officer of Health. Good of you to visit us at TVO.
Great to talk to you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.